Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the extraordinary life of the notorious B.I.G. And we're asking a pretty massive question right up front. Was his journey to becoming one of hip-hop's absolute greatest icons already written in his numbers, long before his words ever changed music forever?
We're going to objectively explore whether the meteoric rise, the immense talent, and, the deeply tragic end of Christopher Wallace, whether all of that just unfolded by pure coincidence, or if it actually moved in eerie harmony with a hidden numerical design. Now, to be clear, we aren't here to prove numerology. Instead, we're using it as a reflective framework to compare against his very real, heavily documented historical milestones.
But hey, before we dive into the esoteric side of things, we absolutely have to acknowledge the gritty reality of his life. Just look at this quote. It captures the raw essence of his debut album, and it perfectly reflects his early survival mindset growing up in Brooklyn. It's just this incredibly raw reminder of the intense, high-stakes environment that shaped his entire worldview, way before fame ever entered the picture.
Section 1. Rise of a Legend.
So, Christopher Wallace was raised by a strict, incredibly hardworking Jamaican mother, right in Brooklyn. And as a kid, he actually had this award-winning gift for English in middle school, honing a natural early talent for freestyling on the streets. But, as is so often the case, the despair of poverty pulled him in a completely different direction. By the time he was 17, he dropped out of high school, which unfortunately led to early arrests in both New York and North Carolina for dealing crack cocaine. What followed was this hyper-compressed, honestly dizzying timeframe of massive success and profound tragedy. Around 1992, he really refocused on his writing, and by 93, his demo tapes had made their way to Sean Diddy Combs, who snatched him up and signed him to Bad Boy Records. Then, in just 4 brief years, he dropped the critically acclaimed Ready to Die, got caught up in a bitter coastal rivalry, and ultimately met a tragic end in a 1997 drive-by shooting in LA. He was just 24 years old. Literally 2 weeks later, his diamond-certified double album Life After Death was released.
Section 2. The Numerical Profile.
Okay, so his core character number of 819 reveals a deeply independent, incredibly business-minded individual. It essentially paints a picture of someone with immense natural charisma, natural leadership within his crew, and this magnetic appeal that basically screamed success right off the bat.
But, the profile also highlights some profound and frankly dangerous weaknesses. It points to a real lack of structure, specifically warning that planning just isn't a strong suit here. It also notes a tendency toward excess, like wanting one thing and instantly wanting 5 more. And crucially, it highlights this ominous habit of making or hiding money at night, along with a deep, hidden impatience that's masked by a cheerful, friendly exterior.
Now, he was also a Life Path 9, which is known as the humanitarian. This path is meant to develop selflessness and build strong foundations. However, if we look at the emo numbers section of his chart, it carries a really dark warning. It explicitly states that excessive aggression and anger could permanently block his progress.
Section 3. The Life Graph Blueprint. This is where things take a truly fascinating turn. His life graph marks him as a mid-path. Now, think about this. Even though he tragically died at 24, his numerical peak arrives at age 66. That's in the year 2038. This implies that his numerical energy cycle governs a legacy that outlives his physical body by decades, suggesting that every single season before that peak is simply preparation and integration for a monumental posthumous impact.
We actually need to pause here for a second and read this specific note straight from the reading itself. Your life graph is not a prediction, it is a map. Right? It requires conscious effort and balance. What this means is the tragic end he met in 1997 wasn't framed by these numbers as some fixed, totally unavoidable fate. Rather, it was a journey where perhaps those warnings just went unheeded. Section 4. Blueprint v. Reality. Let's take a really close look at how this specific tendencies identified in his numerical profile actually manifested in the very real, very public events that absolutely defined hip-hop history. When we map his tendencies directly against history, the alignments are honestly kind of chilling. The profile's note about making money at night perfectly mirrors his teenage years spent dealing drugs. His business-minded core, well, that totally aligns with launching Bad Boy Records. But most tragically, that grave warning that excessive aggression can block progress maps flawlessly to the $40,000 Quad Studios robbery. That was the exact catalyst for the fatal bi-coastal war that permanently stopped his earthly progress. Yet despite his gritty exterior,
We also see these incredible flashes of his Life Path 9 energy, the humanitarian. History actually documents that B.I.G traveled to the West Coast before his death, not just for advance press, but to make a definitive statement that the coastal war was over. On top of that, his philanthropic legacy is still alive and well. The Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation repurposes B.I.G to stand for Books Instead of Guns. So his positive influence is quite literally still shaping the culture today.
Section 5. Coincidence or hidden design? From his natural lyrical brilliance and, sadly, his dangerous excesses, all the way to a legacy peak that extends decades past his death, the milestones of his life really do appear to move in eerie harmony with his numerical blueprint. The warnings of aggression were real. The promise of a massive, enduring legacy was very real. And that lack of structure and deep attraction to the nightlife, those were all heavily documented, undeniable facts of Christopher Wallace's life.
So, whether you view this all as destiny, just pure coincidence, or some hidden numerical design, the Notorious B.I.G's journey offers a profound testament to how talent and legacy can appear to unfold in absolute lockstep with the numbers. His physical life was cut tragically short at just 24, but if his blueprint speaks the truth, his true energetic peak is still decades away. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I want to leave you with this thought. If his map really does extend all the way to 2038, what cultural shockwaves from Christopher Wallace are we yet to experience?